Well, all good things must come to an end, and this really is the end of Undercurrent. So, for our last little stint at Undercurrent, I thought we'd better get George out from behind the camera. This is George here. He's usually doing all the filming and setting up the crazy, wacky exploits we sometimes get into. But without George, there's no programming. You can't just sit here and talk to empty space without somebody calling the shots. And that's literally what George has been doing for the last 4 years. Now, Undercurrent, you know, you were right there at the beginning, weren't you, when Undercurrent got underway in 2009?
Well, almost.
Almost?
I wasn't actually there at the very beginning because I was overseas in the Middle East when the rest of the team came up with this idea of Undercurrent. And then when I got back, I was told, oh, by the way, you're doing a current affairs program.
Right.
So I missed the very beginning, but I was there for the first show and even created the graphics for the show and picked up the music bits and, yeah, made it.
Now, the very first presenter for Undercurrent was Helen, my wife. Helen Mays took over,
Yes.
started it up and ran it for 2 years and then decided that she'd had enough and she passed the baton to me. So she did it for 2 years and I've done it for 2 years and we've managed to ride it out to the very end. And of course we're going because, well, it's the digital switchover and that's the reason we're off the air.
Yep. Yeah, so, well, as most people are aware now, that Tararua TV has to switch off their analogue broadcast because of the DSO, the digital switchover. And they're not in a place to be able to be a digital television station at this point. So effectively, it does mean they switch off.
Meanwhile, we've just been thinking back over those, over the last 2 years at least, that the pair of us have been together, and thinking of some of the memorable or more memorable moments and programs and people that we've come across. So we're going to have a little bit of a reminisce.
A trip down memory lane, as it were.
Yes, and I think the most memorable moment, really, and perhaps of the whole 2 years, would have been the earthquake.
Absolutely.
There we were at Linton Country School talking to the lady from Horizons,
Yes.
all about Conservation Week coming up, and whammo.
Well, yeah, the first thing I noticed there was my tripod started wobbling all over the place, and before you guys even seemed to notice it. So I had to call out and say, hey guys, we better stop this, we're having an earthquake. And
that's when I looked down and the woman was clutching my shoulder rather tightly at the time. Well, I thought, you're touching my shoulder.
There'll also be various different tickets on offer. I think we got from Tim Manoa some World of Wearable Arts tickets to their exhibition.
We're going to cut that. We've got an earthquake.
Well, we do actually.
Goodness.
You want to say something while the happening?
Yes, well, yes, we shake it up. I didn't know you were such a smooth dancer. Man, that's
That's a big one.
But of course, it was our little sort of 15 seconds of fame, wasn't it? Because you managed to get that on the first item on TV3 News.
Yep. Yes. Well, it was kind of funny that afternoon because after such a reasonable size shake, I got home and I had a look online to see what was happening, and there were a few people who had photos up of what had happened, bits of masonry fallen off buildings, or little short interviews with people. Oh, how did you find the earthquake? Where were you? But nobody had any footage during the earthquake, which made our little clip somewhat unique. I mean, you're not going to be standing there filming thinking, gee, I'll keep the camera rolling in case we have an earthquake. So it was quite nice. And so I sent TV3 the link online and they used it on their frontline story that night on TV.
It just goes to show, you know, Sam Goldwyn, Metro Goldwyn Mayer, was right all those years ago when asked about what was the criteria for hooking people into a good movie, and he said you start with an earthquake and build up to a climax.
Well, we'll see what we can do today, shall we? But I mean, that certainly was something not to be forgotten.
We were shaken and stirred that day, weren't we?
But I got a few comments back from that because I also put that up on my Facebook page, and I had a few comments come back about how well you coped with the drama of it. And because you may not recall, but as the ground shook and this young lady grabbed your arm, then you made it very light, and you said, "I didn't know you were such a smooth dancer."
They cut the other line out too. I thought it was the gin we had for lunch. Never mind. And yeah, that was fine. But we were outside. There were no buildings going to fall on us. But what was impressive was listening to the sound of the kids in the classroom hit the deck as one, as part of their earthquake drill. We couldn't see this, but you could hear it, and you could hear exactly what they were doing. They were hitting the deck and getting under their desks, doing the drop, cover, and roll thing. I didn't get that right, did I?
No, that's for fire. Okay, you're fired.
Okay, I'll go gracefully.
Right, but just before you do go, some of the other things we had, I mean, we had some interesting locations that we were filming from at times, didn't we?
Yes, we did. It all tends to blend into one, but when you start picking up little incidents, I remember the time we ended up filming an interview for the show Chess, for instance. And
Yes.
we decided, well, normally we do shows at the theatre, like in the Regent on Broadway, but this time we decided we'd use the chess set outside in the square outside the council building, and we sat there. We actually had to kick someone off the board, didn't we?
Oh yeah,
Someone was playing when we wanted to record, so we pulled television rank.
Yes, indeed. Turn up with a high-vis vest and a camera, you can get away with all sorts of things. So yeah, so we politely asked these people if they wouldn't mind postponing their game because I wanted the chess pieces in a certain spot to look good, and they graciously disappeared for a while. But some of the other things, I mean, not very far from that spot. For me, I think one of the most memorable locations was on the filming from the roof of the library building, the old DIC building.
Now, we were talking to
Tim Hamilton
Tim
about
Hamilton.
parkour.
Yes. No, it was about the movie he'd made.
Oh, the movie, that's
Yeah,
right.
We talked to Tim several times, but it was about the movie he'd made about Palmerston North.
Yes.
And one of his locations had been the roof of the library building. So we went up there, and it was one of those wonderfully windswept days, was it not?
It was. Well, that was actually amazing, showing how well the microphone cover handled the wind, because you guys' clothes were flapping in the breeze, and nobody got blown off the roof, so that worked fine.
And actually, fact, you can see why Tim chose those sorts of locations, because you do get quite a different perspective on the city from way up high.
Yes.
Another thing we got a very good perspective, and you more than me, was of the fix-up job being done in the gorge. Now, the gorge was closed for a year, you'll remember, and that slip was just ginormous, and we got in there with several times checking out various aspects of the gorge and the repair work, and joining the media circus as it went through, and got showing them chipping away at the bridge and trucking out the spoil. Endless operation, but hey, they did it, and they won an award for the work they did on repairing the gorge road.
Although some of the media days were interesting, and one of the earlier ones where they helicoptered the media people in. Now, I don't think you were there that day.
No, I missed out on all those helicopter rides.
But
hey.
but the funny thing, it was quite hilarious. You see this blonde young thing from TVNZ getting helicoptered up there in her pink gumboots, and that made all the guys laugh. It was just so out of place. You know, you got these guys in their steel cap boots and hard hats and everything, and here's Miss Pink Gumboots turn up. That was kind of funny. But another thing up there too was one of the guys from Radio New Zealand was up there one time, and I was able to mic up the spokesperson from NZTA, and so he's walking around with my microphone attached to him. And so when the guy from Radio New Zealand starts interviewing him, I thought, oh, this is good enough. And I just plopped my camera down and filmed part of that interview as well. So I didn't have an interview man with me.
Coattailing.
Absolutely.
What about the great thing that never happened? And there's quite a few of these in our history, but they they bulldozed a rock off the slip, and it went down and made this a humongous splash in the water. And they found an even bigger rock, and so you were getting ready to film this rock, and they pushed it off, and it fell off the edge. You went boop, just over the edge into the mud.
It's
Stuck.
it just.
Such an anticlimax.
Oh. Well, they rung me up to get me to go out there to film that specifically, and it was about a 30-ton rock. So when you get 30 tons sitting on top of lightly packed soil, it'll sink in. So yes, but I mean the other thing I think that was really good about the gorge was the open day they had for the public, and I thought that was actually a very good PR move to let people come in and have a bit of a look at it.
And they certainly turned up in their droves, didn't
Yep, yep, and it was a fantastic day, you know. So we had a lot of fun with those people on their tandem bike. So they turned up there, the trucker from Dannevirke and all these people that you had a chat to. But also being able to coattail both of us this time on the guided tour through the danger zone. And the people who saw that said that it looked so much different from inside the gate than outside the fence.
That was the day where they had the pneumatic picks pulling apart the bridges that had been crushed by the slip. They had to get rid of those
No,
bridges.
I think that was a different day.
Oh,
yeah,
as I
well,
said,
I'm
it
not
all
sure.
kind
Yeah.
of blancmanges into a moving segue of events and people.
It's crazy. But anyway, some of the other locations that we've been to. No,
Harrisville, the
Harrisville.
Speedway,
The Outlaw Speedway.
out there by Oahakia.
Now, I mean, that was fun. I mean, I took out my Texan hat for you, and you wore it, but I like the way you started off the interview. You know, want to see my draw?
Want to see it again?
Yeah, that was great. But you got to cruise around the track in that lovely V8.
Yeah, the widest speedway track in New Zealand.
Yep.
It's an ultra wide and ultra long track, and just a labour of love. Someone has taken his hobby to the nth degree.
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
And holds a lot of special events out there as well. That was fun.
You want to see my draw? You want to see it again?
We ended up going to a few locations around the region from time to time, which we kind of got out and about there, and we actually ended up getting quite a name for you guys turn up everywhere. Yeah.
Oops.
But no, that was good. I mean, we ended up going out to Tokomaru, Shannon, Fielding, Rongotia.
One of those interesting things was the anniversary of the floodgates.
Yes.
The spillway that sits on the highway between Foxton and Shannon. And that kind of segues into the day we went out to Tokomaru to talk about their water woes. You may recall in the news that Tokomaru residents were told to boil their water for the next 14 years. And we went out there and talked to the Toms, who were shall we say, putting together a bit of a ginger group to try and get the water treatment service brought forward. And of course, it's all part of the local body elections which are going on at the moment. But the day I turned up at the Tokomaru store, you were out there filming the floodwaters rampaging through the spillway.
Absolutely. Well, the two just happened to fit in nicely, and I thought, well, if I'm going to Tokomaru, I'd heard that morning from a farming friend, that the spillway was open and up and running, and we'd only just filmed the 50-year celebration, and I thought, I've got to get some footage. So all my years in Palmerston, I'd never been out to the floodgates when they've been operating. And on the way back, I ducked in and got some of the shots at Opiki Bridge as well. So, yeah, it's I've never seen so much water out there before.
So plenty of events.
Lovely.
Yes. Plenty of I did it again. There were plenty of events that we attended, and I suppose the most prestigious of them all was the royal visit to Fielding.
Oh, Absolutely. Now that was fun because you couldn't park anywhere near the zone, and so we parked a little bit out of town, and walking into Fielding, it wasn't sort of until then we sort of discovered that the street we're walking down, straight down Manchester Street, was the street that the royal entourage was coming down not very long after. So I got down to the middle of town there, and I'm walking down the street, and here's these traffic cops on the roundabout, and all the people are behind the barriers. And I walk up to the cops and say, "Do you mind if I do some shooting from here?" And they said, "No, that's fine as long as we're not in the shots." And so I set my camera up on the roundabout as the royal entourage headed down, and I ended up getting swept along with all these other camera people who were part of the royal lot, until this lovely lady with a very British accent said, "Excuse me, who are you filming for?" And when I told her, she said, "We're all supposed to be down there with all the other media people." And I said, "Oh, I'm sorry," but I'm thinking to myself, "I've got the shot I wanted, thank you." So that was quite lovely.
It's a sort of extension of the old adage that if you wander around a place looking official and carrying a clipboard, they'll let you in anywhere. But if you look like a member of a TV crew, the same thing seems to happen often.
Well, yes, it does. Yeah. Well, especially if you look like you know what you're doing.
Of course, we never got that close to the HRHs to
No.
talk to them directly, but it was still a grand occasion.
And I had a good zoom lens on the camera.
Other events we've been to, Evento, that was fairly recent. That was
Yes.
also in Fielding and taking place at Manfield, and we got to traipse through the dressing room where the kids were putting on all these amazing costumes. It is just such an event, such a work of creativity, and they're all at high school and younger.
Yes. And I mean, it's amazing to see the production that they've put together. I mean, over the years, it's evolved into more and more, and they just build on the ideas every year and come up with some incredible costume.
And it started off in a very small way as a fundraiser for Fielding High School, and very quickly outgrew the school hall and went into the Civic Centre in Fielding, and then outgrew that. And when you think about it, if the Manfield Event Centre hadn't been built, where would they go? Because that place is almost tailor-made for an event like that.
It is. Well, not just an event like that. I mean, we've covered quite a number of events at Manfield in various forms. And of course, another recent one was the Hot Rod Swap Meet. But it really wasn't really a hot rod swap meet, was it?
The Hot Rod Swap Meet is rapidly being taken over by one of the country's top car shows. It started in a formal way with people just putting their cars on display, and now they come from all corners of the country, and they fill that whole stadium, and all around it is just an amazing car show full of amazing vehicles, which I think the earliest one was about 1923 or thereabouts, but right up to some really super 2013 or 2012 models of some quite specialist high-powered, high-octane vehicles.
Well, there's one little shot that I love that I got from that, because I mean the car show's in the whole arena area, but it's spilled out into the whole car parking area, which is not actually part of the show itself. It's just where these enthusiasts come along and park their vehicles. And I've got this lovely shot of his nice sporty Mustang right next to a VW Beetle.
But also, Manfield is the home, and has been for a few years now, of the New Zealand Grand Prix.
Yes.
And we've taken the cameras out there a couple of times as well.
Well, yes, we have, although this year was the first time we were able to film the actual event, because up until that it was covered by other TV contracts. And so being able to get out there on the track as the cars were warming up, that was pretty special too.
And Mini Moto, that's another event that happens at Manfield, which is, again, it gets back to creative high school types who build these little mini motorcycles and have a whole couple of days racing them against schools from all over the country, and Manfield becoming a well-known centre for that.
It is.
Another very memorable occasion was getting into, strapping myself into one of those cars and being taken for several laps around Manfield Autocourse at very high speed, hoping that his brakes work because those corners come up incredibly fast.
Well, that's something that I've noticed with Manfield is when you're sitting back watching a race is one thing, but when you're actually out on that track, it feels quite different, doesn't it?
Oh yeah, yeah, and you just hope the driver knows what he's doing, that the brakes are going to work, that he's got his gear changes worked out. Because honestly, and to be honest, it wasn't all that fast a car that we were going in. There's a lot faster vehicles hit that track, and once you get used to the G forces, because it buffets you around. You're strapped in tight, but you really have to wedge yourself into the seat as well to stop yourself getting buffeted about the cab. At least the driver has a steering wheel to hang on to. You're just there in the suicide seat, hanging on for grim death. And you just get used to it, and he pulls over into the pits.
Well, that's the pits, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah.
It is.
Okay.
But a race of a slightly different nature is the Relay for Life, which isn't really a race, but it involves people going round and round a circuit for 24 hours.
Yep.
And that's always a special event. It started here in Palmerston North. The whole concept of Relay for Life was imported from the States and from Australia, and they tried it out in Palmerston North on what was the training college running track. They still do it in the same location, and every year they get dozens and dozens of teams with the sponsored runners, the sponsored circuits, the transponders, so that everybody knows how many laps they've done, and they just do it for 24 hours. And one of the most touching moments, of course, is the candlelight. Well, it's not a parade, is it? But they set up all those candles around the edge of the track as twilight falls.
Yep. So yeah, as it's starting to get dark, they pull out the candles, and it's that old thing of lighting a candle for someone. You know, there's something quite special in the atmosphere that changes at that point.
And this year I got called in to judge the dress up.
The newspaper dress up,
The
yes.
newspaper dress up, which honestly, judging something like that is incredibly hard, especially when you're being filmed doing it.
My pleasure. So, but I mean, there are other things that are more dangerous to film, of course, like the very first ever National Roller Derby.
All right, now that was at the A&M Centre at
B&M Centre,
the B&M Centre.
which is in between the A&M Centre and the C&M Centre, obviously.
The B&M Centre at Arena, or as it's sometimes colloquially known as Arena. Did you know that?
No.
Anyway, but I never having been that close to a whole bevy of roller derby girls, it was quite a sight.
Yes.
It's only just recently been introduced to New Zealand, and Palmerston North just happens to be a hotbed of roller derby talent.
It does. And the thing I love about the roller derby girls are their imagination for their names. You know, some of the names, most of them have double meanings, all of them have puns, and, well...
That just is right up your alley, isn't it?
It is,
so
it
to
is.
speak.
Yes. So, and speaking of alleys, I have nothing to follow that up with.
Haven't
So
you?
we better have a look at our list to see what else we've got. But okay, so some of your most memorable events or peoples or filming things, what would some of those be, Richard?
Well, how about the time when we learned that Aaron Smith had become Manawatu's second All Black? We already had Aaron Cruden, and everyone said, right, great. Aaron's an All Black, one of the first Manawatu All Blacks for a while, and all of a sudden, hey, we got a second All Black in Aaron Smith. Now, Aaron from Fielding was coming back to a special event that had been organised by the Manawatu District Council.
Yes.
He was literally given the key to the town and a little parade, and the turbos turned up to sign. But we managed to get the schedule and find out when he was landing, so we managed to circumvent the whole media bun fight. Because that's one of the things when you're doing television, is that you've got to compete with so many other media interests, and sometimes it compromises what you can do, what you can ask, where you can set your shots up from. There's a whole lot of limitations placed on you. But we bowled out to the airport, bowled as brass, grabbed him as he came through the door, and he was very, very gracious and allowed us to film an interview, which made him late for everything else, which, hey, we're quite proud of that.
Yeah. Well, sometimes it's kind of feeling like we're the underdogs, and sometimes we win. You know, it's a very cool feeling.
It is.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, but still on the subject of rugby, I mean, I've got this lovely shot of you holding up the Rugby League World Cup.
That's a different sort of rugby.
It
I
is.
have. And I got to meet one of the all-time legends of the New Zealand game, Ruben Wiki. And there we were at Arena, and they were busy conducting a sports day for kids, and he brought along the Rugby League World Cup. Now, it's a huge piece of silverware, isn't it? And it got stolen for a couple of decades. Went missing in Britain. And they found it in a rubbish dump eventually, about 20 years after it first went missing. And of course, New Zealand are the current holders of that cup. And Ruben Wiki brought it with him on his travelling roadshow through to Arena. So, yeah, that was we got to touch the silverware.
Yes.
But while we're still on that rugby, I remember the time that we went out to the Turbos training camp.
Out by Saddle Road.
Yeah, and they gave us these directions, and we tried every little road off the main road that we could find looking for this place. The directions weren't all that specific, and that anyway, eventually, of course, we got there and ended up in a wool barn.
We did. Yes.
with the rest of the players as they were put through a whole lot of exercises, from driving utes and tractors to all kinds of things, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, backing trailers and pouring cups of tea with diggers, and yeah, all sorts of interesting little things.
Of course, we filmed some of that during Central District's field days as well.
Indeed, yes.
Yeah, lots of activities for cameras, things that move, and interesting people who've got a lot to say for themselves and their passions. And that's basically what we've tried to tap into.
Yep.
Interesting people who have interesting pastimes or hobbies, or have done interesting things and are really passionate about it. And they're really good interview subjects, because you just almost put a microphone in front of them and off they go.
Wind them up, let them go.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, mind you, I mean, that's something a lot of the viewers may not realise, but we've tried to pick our interviews so that we've got as much mix of interest factor and visual content, and that's not always easy, is it?
It's also not always easy tracking them down and getting them to say, yes, we can be there when you can. It's a question of coordination. And then there are those other moments where you're out on the site and you're in full flight, but something else is in full flight as well at the same time.
Yes.
And
I wonder what they might be. Oh.
Aeroplanes. Honestly, aeroplanes are our worst enemy. You're out there on location, trying to have a conversation, and that plane comes along. And there was one specific interview that we did. We found
Semi-rural, wasn't it?
Yes. We didn't realise it at the time, but we soon got the gist of it. We were just off the end of the Taonui Airport runway. We were wondering why there were so many planes. We didn't realise we were in such close proximity to it. And, you know, every 30 seconds?
Oh, pretty much sometimes.
Yes.
But I never realised that Taonui Airport was so busy.
It's one of the busiest little airports in the
Yeah.
country. Just about drove us mad that day.
So we said, well, we're going to have to build the machines ourselves. Same thing happened with marketing. We're going to have to market them.
Sorry, plane.
because they have the infrastructure and the marketing support on a global basis.
But there was one even better than that. You know, forgetting the planes, we're in town, in the bottom end of town, down by
Sorry,
College
we
Street.
just have to retrack here because the planes mess the sound up. That's
Oh, yes,
basically
that's
it.
right,
It messes
yes.
the sound up, and all of a sudden it overpowers everything, and you have to stop, and you can't hear it. So
And then you've got to try and remember what was the question you asked, and where it
before the
cuts
plane
off.
came along, yes.
Yeah. So, but then aside from planes, we're down the bottom end of College Street, and way down West End. There's nowhere near. We're the opposite side of town to the airport, and we're busy filming this lovely little interview. All of a sudden, agricultural tractor comes tearing down the road, and then it turned around and it came back. So it interrupted us twice for the one interview.
Yeah, that reminded me when we were doing the spillway, all those empty potato trucks.
Oh,
and
yes.
because they're empty, the metallic sides, they hit a bump and
they
they just
rattle.
resound. The numbers of times we had to stop that interview because of the trucks rattling by. Yeah, little things like that you don't actually get to see. They're on the bloopers tape somewhere, but hey, fortunately a lot of those bloopers are buried, aren't they,
Well,
George?
yeah. Well, there's only been one editor, and he hasn't had time to do many blooper reels. However,
What a
speaking of-
shame.
Speaking of things like blooper reels, I must admit to the viewers that there have been a number of interviews we've been on, and I've kind of sucker punched Richard into things which he may not have otherwise done, or he might have. But I mean, driving around a pre-evento interview in the Noddy car, and he was really trying to run me over.
You've got seatbelts.
And then you just can hit.
Beep, beep. So last week we did defensive driving. I'm about to get run down by a Noddy. Yeah, but I
My
mean,
one regret, there weren't revolving knives on the hubs.
yeah, well that's nice.
Yes,
So-
but you've got me to do all sorts of other stuff as well.
Well, yes. There was the UCOL Open Day, and we had these guys running around trying to break the beams on the light thing, and
It was a sort of fitness test, wasn't it?
yeah,
Yeah.
but they were young guys,
They were.
Yeah,
Young bucks.
and some comment was made about a challenge, and I piped up immediately and says, "Yeah, Richard will do it." But
But,
you tell this one.
well, I got the same score as the young buck. Even this old, slightly overweight senior gentleman of indeterminate years can hold their own against. And he was a sport and fitness graduate too, wasn't he?
He was,
Yeah,
yes.
I thought you'd done pretty well for an old fella.
So that was one you probably didn't mind me pushing you into. So
Well, I only found that out afterwards. At
Of
the
course.
time, I was resenting it fully, and I wasn't even trying. I was just trying to survive it.
I had total faith in you, Richard.
But to come up even Stevens was icing. That was great.
It was brilliant. Yes. Well, of course, you had the other one with the drink driving thing at Freiburg High School, with Horizons and the police combined. event.
And the climbing tower.
Yes.
And they had these special goggles which simulate what it does to your perception when you've had more than a few. In fact, when you're on or over the limit. And one of the exercises was trying to walk the line with these goggles, and it's really hard because your feet aren't where you think they are at all. And then putting a key into the lock of the car and trying to get into it, and just filming that. And then they put the goggles on people trying to climb up the climbing wall as well.
Oh, did they?
Oh yes, and it made it. It was hard enough as it was, but with the goggles, almost impossible.
Yeah.
Still, everyone had a lot of fun.
Yeah. Well, actually, I think I recall that at the end of the little goggles session, you weren't feeling so hot.
No, because it messes up your internal balance as well. I was feeling a little bit, what do you call,
Queasy.
motion sick at the end of it. It sort of affected my inner things.
Yes. Indeed. One of my favourite ones for the intro was the yarn bombing program, where you came along in your ski mask. And,
Oh
yeah.
yes, the Phantom Yarn Bombers. And
Yes.
they all came along in disguise
And
as well,
I tell you what, the disguises were rather interesting.
weren't they?
Yeah. So when they took their disguises off, it was a bit of a surprise disguise. So yeah, I mean, the guy with the beard was not a guy at all.
Well, it's not often you get to do an interview incognito. It is me, look. But my guests on Undercurrent are the members of Woolly Riot, purportedly, because how would I know?
You'll never know.
Then I could be interviewing imposters.
He had a nice knitted beard, though. It was
Oh,
very
yes.
tidy.
Yeah, very
very
lovely.
tidy. Yes, and of course, those yarn bombers have pulled off many spectacular stunts over the years. One of their favourite statues is the one of C.B. Munro outside the Rugby Museum. And that's been adorned with all sorts of special outfits. The latest one, of course, was was a knitted Roman suit of Roman armour. But we were there when the Rugby Museum opened,
Yes.
and did a full feature on that Rugby Museum and a lot of the exhibits inside, and that was very interesting. One of those very interesting moments where you're seeing some of this incredible memorabilia that's been stored, and also there was a great rugby cartoon exhibition on at the same time, all tied in, of course, with the Rugby World Cup events that happened in Palmerston North.
And of course, the book interview with Martin Snedden.
That's right. Martin Snedden, of course, was was the CEO of the whole Rugby World Cup operation. We managed to get him to talk about his book and also his life in cricket and also with the Rugby World Cup. And I see he's just gone back to cricket again.
Oh, has he?
He's now in charge. He was leaving the Rugby World Cup to go head of the New Zealand Tourism Agency, which he's still there, but cricket have just wooed him back as well to look after the affairs of New Zealand cricket.
Well, turning his back on rugby, that's hardly cricket, eh?
Well, of course he's gone back to his roots.
Great. Well, no, we've had a lot of fun over the last couple of years, Richard. And so on camera, I'd just like to say thank you very much for the work you've put in. It's been much appreciated. And juggling timetables when you have worked so hard and then you've rung me up or texted me and said, oh, I've got this interview for this sort of time, and then I've only just got another interview for the same time and I've had to go back and say, can't do that one. And then the juggle starts again.
Well, it's thanks to you, because the front, what you see on camera is really just the proverbial iceberg's tip, because it's actually the work that goes on in the editing suite that hangs it all together. This guy's made me look good and bad.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think the bottom line is we've had a lot of fun doing it too.
Yeah, and we'll miss it, won't we? Hmm?
Yes, we will.
We
So-
hope you'll miss us too.
Yes.
But
and-
we'll be back.
Well, we hope so. So, yeah, well, in fact, rumour has it that there may well be a new TV station starting up in the Manawatu, based in Palmerston North City. So we're looking forward to seeing what happens in 2014.
We are indeed. Thanks for watching. Thanks for being friends. And thanks for giving us those really interesting and passionate stories that we've enjoyed bringing to a wider audience.
So it's good night from me.
And it's good night from him.
I had to do that one.